Hey everybody, this is Robert from Black Belt Gaming, continuing my series on Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st Edition. Let's take a look at magic users. Magic users, later called wizards, mages. Back in the days, it was simply called magic user. I don't have a lot of experience playing magic users. In fact, I was always finding myself playing more of the fighter type characters, even clerics, paladins, but not particularly this class. I think I was a little turned off by the very low four-sided die for hit points. I just thought, how in the world can they survive? They also take a good bit of experience points to start leveling up. Here we see the titles, which was very common in 1st edition. So, magic users, well, they're going to need intelligence. Intelligence is most important for the magic user class. Four-sided die for hit points. What kind of weapons and armor can they use? Well, not much. Let's take a look. Well, there you see it. Magic user armor. None. Shield, none. Weapons allowed. A dagger, a dart, or a staff. And that's it. Well, some of you that came into the hobby a little more recently might think, well, magic users, wizards, they're not all bad. You've got these cantrips, these so many spells per day. You're not that bad off. Well, magic users back in 1st edition. A level 1 magic user in 1st edition with the core books. You didn't have any 0 level spells. You had 1st level spells only, and you started with 1. And that was all you could do for the entire day, is cast 1 spell. But here you can see that the magic goes up to level 9 spells. This could be a little confusing for a player to make a difference, separate the terminology between a character level and a spell level. Just because you might be 2nd level magic user doesn't mean that you can use 2nd level magic user spells yet. I thought I read somewhere, maybe in the DM guide, that there was some discussion about this terminology. It could have been in the player's handbook, I'm not sure. But anyway, it is different. So you don't get to use 2nd level spells until you become a 3rd level magic user. So let's keep talking about the magic and what kind of spells you start with and how important intelligence is. I always loved this little bit of artwork near the intelligence table in the 1st edition AD&D Player's Handbook. You can obviously see here a magic user that is learning a more powerful spell. Looks quite confident there, quite skilled. And then you see this guy obviously struggling to make sense of these spells that he's trying to study. This is represented here in the intelligence table. To cast higher level magic spells, you're going to need a higher ability score. So you may reach a point where you're kind of capable of wielding greater power, but you're just not intelligent enough to make sense of the magic. So you need a higher ability score in intelligence to use the more powerful magic spells, and this table indicates that. Down here, this is where you kind of take your information from to put your spell book together. And what you would do here is, let's say you had a intelligence of 15. So we're going to go here with the top of this gray rectangle. You would go through all of the first level spells if you were a first level magic user. And you would kind of pick and choose which spell you want to try to have in your spell book. You would then roll this percentage dice. You would roll, the 2d10s or whatever it is, and you have a 65% chance to know that spell. If you checked, let's say, something like Magic Missile, and then you rolled and you got a 65 or less, then you could say, all right, that's going in my spell book, and that will count as one of my spells. Then you go along and you pick some others. Some of them you're going to be able to, due to the percentage chance here, you're going to be able to make sense out of them, and others you can't. And if you're only really allowed here to check once. So let's say I really wanted sleep, but I rolled a 78. Then I would have to make a note on some paper that I don't know that. I can't make sense of that spell. So it doesn't go in my spell book. Anyway, you go through the list, checking each of the spells that you want, and you need to come to a minimum number here. So for an intelligence of 15, you're going to need 7 spells at minimum in your spell book. The maximum number you can have is 11. But let's say you've been rolling the percentage and the dice just haven't been very kind, and you've actually gone through the entire list and you still don't have the minimum number. Well, you get to go back and try again. So you start choosing, let's say you want to try for sleep again. You get another chance because you still don't have your minimum number yet. And you try it, let's say this time you get it, and you write down sleep in your spell book. And then if that brings you up to 7 spells, then you're good to go, you're finished. If not, you need to keep going until you've reached your minimum number. As you adventure, you have a chance to acquire new spells. And I've seen it where players have had to roll to see if they can successfully understand this new spell and put it in their spell book. And other games where they just let the player take the scroll and successfully transfer it over, and they don't need to go through this rolling process. So just depends on the DM and their game. But you need to be aware of your maximum number. So even if you acquire a bunch of magical scrolls or spell books or something like that, and you do reach your maximum number of spells at that level, you can't learn anymore. You're just not smart enough to retain the knowledge to put any more in your spell book. So some limitations there, a minimum number and a maximum number. When you looked in the player's handbook, you would look up the class, and then the spells would be divided by level. And you just kind of looked at the list, and there's quite a few first level spells there. And you could choose the ones that you wanted to try for to have in your magic book. But remember, as a first level magic user, when you head out on your adventure, although you may have, let's say, 7 of these spells in your book, you're only allowed to memorize and have one of them ready. And then once you cast that spell, you're done for the day. So it was quite a bit more restrictive. And that was probably one of the reasons why in a lot of the lower level games I just didn't choose to play a magic user. But let me tell you about when I saw someone who was good at playing magic users. Well, the first time I think that I really saw what a magic user could do was in a game. There were a lot of people playing that night, and it was with a new group that I wasn't used to. But there was a big old fella over across the table, much older than we were. He had a beard and everything. and he was playing a magic user, and we were in a battle. I can't remember with what. I think I remember some skeleton miniatures, and I was first, maybe second level, as we were trying to fight the enemy, and there were quite a few on the table. But this guy started to cast his magic, and he just started to do tremendous damage. And I remember seeing him, something like lightning bolt here. He's rolling a d6 for each level of experience that he has. And to be able to cast this spell, he's at least maybe 5th level as a character. So he's rolling just handfuls of d6s, and I'm like, wow. And so he's casting these very powerful magic spells and just exploding things right and left. And I remember thinking, just in a moment of enlightenment, I was just thinking, so that's what a magic user can do if they stick with the class and get through the first levels of experience. Well, let's just take a brief look here at one of the magic user spells that was quite popular back in those days, and that was sleep. It was a first level spell, and this is the thing that many people miss. There's no saving throw. No saving throw. I've even seen experienced AD&D players forget this. There's no saving throw. The magic here, how many creatures you can put to sleep, is based on basically how tough they are. So you need to reference this over here, the total hit dice, and then it'll talk about how many of those you can put to sleep. So the sleep spell, you can see the range there, the duration. What I wanted to talk about here was components and casting time. You see the V, S, and M. So you need a verbal. That means you need to be able to speak. The S, is it somatic? It's gestures. Being able to make gestures and signs with your hands. And then the M is for material. You need some sort of material component. And I've seen in some games where that's really just hand waved, but I'll say in some of the better AD&D games I was in, it was a little more closely monitored. An archer needed to take care that they had the right number of arrows to make it. A fighter needed to take good care of his weapons and his armor. The party needed to make sure there were enough torches, because light could become the difference between life and death in a dungeon. So when you came down here, what did you need to cast this spell? The material component for this spell is a pinch of fine sand, rose petals, or a live cricket. And I do remember an adventure where we were with a low-level magic user who had sleep as his spell, and he was using pinches of fine sand to cast his magical spells. So he needed to take care of his components. He needed to have them in his bag and separate little bags inside of that bag. Needed to make sure that he didn't lose them or that they got damaged or anything like that. We ended up in a tough spot. We were captured, and we had plenty of time to rest. There was actually very little else to do. One of the characters was able to pick the lock on the cage that we were in with an old bone, and we were able to start to sneak out. And the wizard really wanted to be able to help the party by casting his spell, but he didn't have his components. We were all missing our weapons and armor and all of that because we were prisoners. But we were in this sort of cave, and as we were nearing our escape to get towards the entrance, we were being chased. I think it was by goblins. And the wizard saw a collection of live crickets. They were just clustered together there at the entrance to the cave. And I remember it was a great role-playing and part of the action sequence where he, took a dive into this mound of crickets, picked one up in his hand, and then at that moment he had his ammunition and he was able to fire off his sleep spell, which took down quite a few of the goblins. Goblins are going to be up to 1 hit dice, so therefore you roll a 4d4, and that's the number affected. And I think he dropped almost all of them, and that was what we needed. The others panicked, and we were able to get out of there. So that was a really cool event where sort of a strict policing of the components actually just brought a lot of life to the game. It just made it that much more interesting and real to us as we were telling the story. Well, there's certainly a good bit more to the magic user with the different magical items that they can use, which help them kind of they don't have to be so reliant on their number of spells per day when they can use magic wands and staves and rings and scrolls and all of that kind of thing. So could be much more to talk about with the magic user, including other spells and what they do, but I think I'll cut it off there today. That's an introduction to the magic user in 1st edition AD&D. I guess in closing I should mention one other thing. It comes up a lot with how can you contribute to the adventuring party as a very low level, fragile character, a very fragile magic user with just one spell. And I've seen a number of DMs over the years allow the magic user to really take advantage of their intelligence, their ability score in intelligence. And in a previous video I talked about those ability score checks and different ways you can do that, whether it's rolling d6s or rolling a percentage die. But allowing the magic user to have, to use his knowledge and his study in different ways to help the party. So it could be some sort of lore. I think I remember some sort of, academic check. You see that in more modern editions with arcana checks, history checks. I mean, they have it listed as a specific skill, but back in these days we didn't have those skill lists. So it just went off of intelligence. So, sometimes we were battling a monster and we might allow the magic user to make a check against his intelligence to see if he can identify what it is or what its weakness may be, that kind of thing. And that was a way that wizards could help and help the party understand the world around them better. And so you can see that in sort of the Gandalf character with some of the knowledge that he has and how he can sort of lead the party that way. So something to think about. I've heard on the far other end just the horror stories of being a first level magic user with 1 hit point and a dart and just trying to cower in the corner until the encounter is over, especially after you've cast your 1 spell for the day. So I think it's better, in my opinion, if you allow the magic users to contribute in other ways, not just straight combat. So have fun with it. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll catch you later.